Today we're diving straight into what I like to call the billion-dollar paradox. We're heading to South Africa's Limpopo province, and let me tell you, this is a place where ancient gold-crafting kingdoms literally share the exact same soil as massive, modern, mechanized coal operations. What we're going to uncover today is absolutely fascinating because it completely shatters the assumptions we usually project onto rural landscapes. Okay, so let me ask you something. If I told you to picture a province where everyday folks and even commercial farmers literally have to dig their own boreholes just to get a reliable supply of drinking water, your mind probably jumps straight to images of severe poverty, right? Or maybe systemic collapse? But what if I told you this exact same region is sitting on an almost incomprehensible amount of physical, heavy industry wealth? This is the ultimate cognitive dissonance of Limpopo. You have this massive subterranean wealth coexisting directly with a total lack of basic surface-level municipal water.
The disconnect is honestly jarring. Just look at the underground reality here. Limpopo boasts South Africa's largest platinum deposit. On top of that, its Waterberg coal field holds 40% of the entire country's coal reserves. 40%! That is absolutely vital for the national energy grid. They are literally sitting on diamonds, emeralds, gold, and iron ore. Yet on the surface, everyday citizens are forced to drill deep into the earth in their own backyards just to survive. It's kind of like owning a bank vault packed to the ceiling with gold bars, but somehow you can't afford to get the plumbing fixed in your own kitchen.
Now, to understand how this wild paradox came to be, we have to look at the bureaucratic scramble that actually birthed its modern borders. The sheer number of name changes this place went through in a single decade is enough to give you whiplash. Back in 1994, during the post-apartheid reconstruction, they basically had to smash together a piece of the old Transvaal with three former Bantustans, Leboa, Gazankulu, and Venda. Calling it the Northern Province in 1995, that was really just a temporary geographic placeholder. It was pure triage. It actually took a massive South African constitutional amendment in 2003 just to formalize the name Limpopo.
But here's the thing about that 2003 name change. It wasn't just some bureaucratic invention. It was a deliberate reclamation of an ancient legacy of wealth. I mean, look at this incredible artifact. This is the Mapungubwe golden rhinoceros. It's a wooden core, right, meticulously covered in gold foil, and it's held in place by these tiny handcrafted tags. It was crafted by highly specialized artisans way back between the years 800 and 1290 CE. And what that proves is that they had a highly stratified society with a massive surplus of both food and wealth centuries ago.
And their wealth wasn't just local either. These ancient settlements, including the later Thulamela site, which was operating between the 15th and 17th centuries, they built vast wealth through global trade empires. They were literally smelting gold and trading it through these massive networks that reached as far as India and China. And this is centuries before European ships ever even arrived on the coast. This whole ancient trade network was entirely dictated by the region's lush, powerful geography. They built exactly where the rivers and valleys allowed for agriculture and safe passage.
And you know what? That geography is still an absolute powerhouse today. When we look at the province's unbound landscapes, Limpopo features these massive ecological zones. You've got the Waterberg Biosphere covering a staggering 15,000 square kilometers, and the Veme Biosphere up in the Salpansberg Mountains. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand what a biosphere actually is. Unlike a strictly fenced-off national park, a biosphere is a designated ecosystem that harmonizes human habitation and sustainable farming right alongside core protected wildlife areas. People actually live there. They integrate directly with the land.
The sheer volume of that geographical wealth is, well, it's staggering. I mean, they account for 80% of South Africa's game hunting industry. They grow massive amounts of tropical fruits. And they host the Great Limpopo Trans-Frontier Park. That's an initiative where they literally drop the international fences to restore ancient borderless animal migration routes. But there's also a highly pragmatic tourist draw here. Because let's face it, to fund expensive conservation, sometimes you need quirky attractions, like hollowing out a massive ancient Baobab tree to create a fully functional pub. I know it sounds hilarious, but it's a very real, very clever way to capture the tourist dollars they need to support the local economy.
So, with all that being said, how does this incredible natural and mineral wealth actually reconcile with our initial water paradox? Well, the answer comes down to infrastructure and the cold, hard economic reality of multinational capital. See, mining is incredibly capital intensive. These big corporations build hugely expensive infrastructure, things like the N1 highway and massive rail lines heading straight down to the hyper-industrialized Gauteng axis. But those are built primarily to extract and export heavy minerals out of the province. Building a complex municipal water grid across rugged, rural terrain, that is prohibitively expensive. So the heavy infrastructure strictly serves the industry, completely bypassing local sustainment.
At this point, you might be wondering, how do the people actually endure that kind of structural imbalance? Well, let's pivot to what is undoubtedly the province's greatest strength, its deeply rooted demographics. With a 97.3% black population, primarily made up of the Pedi, Tsonga, and Venda cultures, Limpopo completely upends everything you'd assume about rural living in an economically strained province. They take this ancient tradition and integrate it directly into modern governance. They do this through a profoundly powerful institution known as the Limpopo House of Traditional Leaders, which officially advises the provincial legislature. And because of that incredibly strong cultural integration, we arrive at a truly staggering statistic. Get ready for this. Despite the absolute lack of basic municipal infrastructure, like running water, a massive 96.2% of Limpopo residents live in formal housing. Let that sink in. 96.2%. That is the absolute highest formal housing rate in the entire country. It's literally higher than the hyper-industrialized urban centers.
So how in the world is that possible? Let's break down the mechanics of what is essentially an anti-urban rebellion. If you were to move to a big city like Johannesburg, you are immediately weighed down by heavy debt, crazy commercial real estate prices, and property taxes. But in Limpopo, land is allocated by traditional leaders on ancestral tribal lands. You don't have a traditional urban mortgage. Because you aren't spending millions just buying the plot of land itself, every single cent of your capital goes directly into the physical structure of your home.
And this whole economic model has sparked a massive, heavily documented trend of rural development. Residents are literally building lavish, multi-story rural mansions directly over that mineral-rich soil. And listen, these mansions aren't just some weird anomaly. They are a deliberate, empowering statement. These families are actively choosing to bring their capital back home. It's a way of saying, my heritage is not something to escape, it is worthy of my greatest investment. They are cementing their modern wealth directly on top of their ancestral land. Now, if you want the ultimate proof of this community's resilience, you just have to look at the public health data. Between 2007 and 2019, Limpopo saw its HIV incidence rate drop from a high of 18.5% all the way down to 13.2%. That makes it one of the lowest rates in the country. How do they pull that off? Because effective public health interventions require deep community trust. By mobilizing through embedded institutions like the House of Traditional Leaders, they achieved a massive public health victory that physical government infrastructure could never have achieved on its own. Okay, before we wrap up, there is one final, really unexpected paradox regarding South Africa's fiercely tribal domestic rugby competition, the Currie Cup. Given all this intense local pride we've just been talking about, you would absolutely assume Limpopo has a heavily funded premier provincial rugby team, right? But they don't. They bizarrely lack a top-tier, localized institutional sporting infrastructure. Instead, they're represented by the Blue Bulls, a team based entirely outside the province down in Pretoria. So it begs the ultimate question. How does world-class excellence thrive without that premier institutional grid? Well, look no further than the capital city of Polokwane, which is the native home of Victor Matfield. He's arguably one of the greatest to ever play his position, a total titan of the sport, and the second most capped forward in the legendary history of the Springboks. Born and raised right there in Limpopo. And I think that really is the final paradox of Limpopo. When a community has deep, ancient, unbroken roots, you don't always need the perfect grid to produce absolute global excellence. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope this completely changed how you look at the map.